and this Eastern Med area has a lot of controversies. So we're going to try and showcase as much as we can. But because of that, you've already seen this, but there's the typical disclaimer. So I don't think I need to really allow that to run through and sit too long. I think you understand that this is sensitive. Some people are going to probably be surprised with some of the results, but again, we're still working on this project. Quick maritime state of play summary. This is the Eastern Med. We're going to be focusing on 7 countries. We're looking at Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Egypt. It covers an area of just about 465,000 square kilometers geodetic. We're looking here, quick snapshot. You'll see that it's green and red as far as ratification of UNCLOS. So Greece, Cyprus, Lebanon, Egypt, yes. Turkey, Syria, Israel, no. Coastlines in the study area, there was about 4,326, 778 covered by straight baselines, and the rest are normal baselines. There's tri-junction points, which are really interesting. I'm not going to list them because we're going to go through them individually. Most importantly, there's 12 maritime boundaries that cover this area. 2 of them are bilateral treaties, 10 of them unresolved, leaving 83.8% of these waters unresolved. And to date, 5 most recent major hydrocarbon discoveries that were made in the area. And again, we're going to cover all this. Just really quickly, just so that we refocus similar to the last presentation, we're actually using data sources because of its proximity to Europe and Africa. So material is being used out of both global regional data sets within the FUGRO global database. But this is going to be our focus area. And Clive already gave you my background on By the Book, so I don't need to go and redefine that. But step 1, we're going to go through, we're going to map, review all relevant coastlines for all applicable coastal states. Again, only in the Eastern Med. Locate all land terminus points, which was a bit of, took a bit of work. We're going to review each coastal state's official territorial sea baseline models, combinations of normal and or straight. Number 4, accurately compute all the tri-junction points. 5, we're going to run through maritime boundaries. We're going to start by importing bilateral treaties. We're going to then review unilateral claimed, and then we're going to create, produce, and compute strict equidistance lines by the book. 6, we're going to review existing recent major offshore hydrocarbon discoveries. And 7, we're going to look why this area is getting volatile with the onslaught of oil exploration in the area, because every government is issuing acreage and they're getting a little over keen. This is the summary slide of the entire Mediterranean region. It's 2.5 million square kilometers of maritime space for 21 countries. All flags are listed, the backdrop, and all the nice high-res images we use is the 0.9 meter Airbus Defense and or combinations of digital globe, but it's 0.9 meter.
You step back. Okay.
Sorry.
I had my nice face and you kicked me off. It was my turn.
Sorry.
Rob. Where is the map?
This is teamwork here.
This is excellent.
We already have a
Teamwork.
dispute.
Okay. This zone, which I like to share with you, this is the Euromed. We have, like Rob said, 2.5 million square kilometers. We have almost 516 million people, which is 3 times the size of Russia. We have 54 maritime boundaries, and as Rob said, we have only 16 treated. The whole zone is around 46,000 kilometers of coastlines. The zone has 67 volcanoes. We have 23 volcanoes active, and we have 58 coal power plants. And I will have the time during the Q&A why I did bring up the volcanoes and why did I bring up the coal power plant. In the next slides, Rob will be based on the best available science, share with you the way forward to determine the coastlines and hopefully to reach for a victory through the UNCLOS like our predecessor, Robin, cleverly showed us that with UNCLO we are able to reach a successful solution and solve any impasse through diplomacy. In the last 40 years, like in Peter's previous presentation, we have had almost 24 to 25 ruling according to UNCLO.
Okay, so just moving ahead, this is the Eastern Med. This is the main focus of our regional desktop study, so we're not looking at the whole Med. We just picked off the East Med. This is a 1 to 4 million scale nautical, or sorry, a scene. You'll see starting up in the northwest, we've got portions of Greece. We're going to across the top cover Turkey. We've got all of Cyprus. We've got Syria in the northeast. We've got Lebanon. We've got Israel, and we round out the bottom with Egypt. So that's going to be the focal point of our analysis. The area in green represents the area that we did all our maritime boundary and our law of the sea analysis on. So that's the focal point. That is the 465,000 square kilometers. By the book, again, step one, I already mentioned earlier, all law of the sea projects begin with coastlines. So here we have the regional starting point, again, 1 to 4 million scale. All the countries are shown based on their flags. And again, I mentioned in the opening slides, there's about 4,326 nautical miles of coastline according to World Vector Shoreline 2. Data, declassified military data from U.S. Defense. It's only good to mean high water, so it's not bad for starting a desktop study. And we needed to look at all the different baselines that the various governments use. But the coastlines at this, in our database, are at 1 to 75,000 scale. So they're okay for a regional reconnaissance mapping project. Step two, land terminus points. Law of the sea, by definition, begins if you have two neighboring states. So we don't have that for all of our study area. But starting down in the southeast, we've got Egypt and Israel. Some considerations with Gaza as well. But we're looking at Egypt, Israel in the first red area. The second one is Israel, Lebanon, is a land terminus point that needed to be looked at. Lebanon, Syria, and Syria, Turkey. So those are the four main that we're going to focus on. Now, of course, to do the study properly for this area, we needed to have a start for Greece, Turkey. So we're looking up in the upper northwest corner there as well. And there is no land terminus for Cyprus because it's an island. We don't have a lot of time to go through all of this. And again, when I said we did this study, we have over 457 pages of research and analysis and proprietary information in the study. But here's one, just showing you how we did the analysis. This is the land terminus point for Lebanon, Syria. You can see that there is down the river, the center of the river is the land terminus, or the land boundary. The yellow point or star is the land terminus, and that is our LTP3 with the lat long in Mercator WGS 84 down to sub-meter. You can even on this high-res imagery, which is so wonderful, you can see the customs gate houses on either side of the border crossing. So we can actually get right down and see that level of detail. Step three, reviewing all the coastal states baselines for the by the book, for their territorial sea model. All 7 countries have the right to use normal baselines. Data not publicly available in all cases, as I know that for most of the planet. But straight baselines, we have some Egyptian gazettes from January 9, 1990. You can see that Cyprus has May 11th, 93. Syria claims to use some, but there is no gazette or published. But there's some hand-drawn maps. And then Turkey used them up until, and then they repealed them later on in May 20th. So those were old. They were from 64, and they repealed them in 82. So we don't totally know the status, but we definitely know that everyone is able to use normal baselines, and there's an awful lot of areas that we should do some review on. So just giving some highlights, we're going to pick on Cyprus. This is the area in question. We're going to look at Cyprus on the north coast between Cyprus and Turkey, because it's a relevant area for boundary. This area, Yeni, Iraq, geez, I'm real bad with names. As we zoom in, you'll see on this high-res image, scale 1 to 7,500, you'll see what it looks like when you plot up a straight baseline. that was drawn with pencil and ruler on a small scale chart in 1993. So these are not properly surveyed. So when we did some of the analysis, you can have improvements going into the north coast. You'll see all the normal baselines that were interpreted, or in this case, the land-sea interface with some of the offshore smaller features, because this is again a 0.9 meter res image. And again, keeping a look at the inset, you'll see the little yellow star up inside there. This is up on a coast that's relevant, and these points will directly factor into a boundary that is still yet to be determined. That last slide just threw at you that said 80% of the evaluated straight baselines were off by more than 500 meters. So that's bad news for old base points. Tri-junction points, I mentioned them. They're all listed here. You'll see going through the groupings of Greece, Turkey, Egypt, Turkey, Cyprus, Egypt, Turkey, Syria, Cyprus, Cyprus, Syria, Lebanon, Lebanon, Cyprus, Israel, and Cyprus, Israel, Egypt. Again, these were pretty intricately computed. No boots on the ground. This is a desktop study, and we're using the most amazing imagery available, and you'll see that in action here for one of the tri-junction points. This is tri-junction point number 1. This is part of the study, and this was just done in July, and the imagery is from July 2019. So it's really tough to argue that this is not current data. The inset there is the relevant feature in red that is Greek, and you'll see that the yellow outer edge was mapped on that inset 1 to 25,000. You'll see the inset up in the northeast for Turkey. There's 2 relevant islands at 1 to 7,500. And you'll see down in the southeast, that is the relevant portion of Egyptian coastline, and that was mapped at 25,000. Now, the more important thing is computing the tri-junction point, again by the book. This is absolutely down to, and our mapping is in quarter meter resolution on the planet, so it's really tough to argue that this is not accurate. Each one of those line lengths are exactly 143.8 nautical miles, and the little happy face is tri-junction point. In this case, tri-junction point number 1. So that basically tells us and defines for us the absolute equitable location where those 3 states' coastlines come into the closest proximity. Now, taking that and wandering through the whole region as a whole, you'll see the one that we just did with the little red happy face. That is our tri-junction point 1 for Greece, Turkey, and Egypt. Just a little bit to the east, you're going to see that there's one for Turkey versus Cyprus versus Egypt. Moving up into the northeast, you're going to see the one that was computed for Turkey versus Cyprus versus Syria. Moving then down a little bit, you will see the Cyprus, Syria, Lebanon. Moving on down a little bit further, you're going to see the Cyprus, Lebanon, Israel. And then last, in number 6 of the study, at least in the extent of our study area, you're going to see Cyprus, Israel, and Egypt. So this basically is defined based on the mathematics and doing this down to the precision that we had from the 0.9 meter satellite imagery. Step 5, maritime boundaries, is going to be broken down into 3 components: bilaterals, unilaterals, and computed strict equidistance line by the book as the courts would follow. But first we're going to look at the bilaterals. So we do have 2 in here. I mentioned that in the opening statement. We have a bilateral treaty between Egypt and Cyprus that was agreed upon in 2003, February. Reverse engineering and all the wonderful details that Pete mentioned that I'm getting pretty good at. We could see, give or take a few, but they did a strict equidistance line from their old straight baselines back in the day. I worked on this one between Cyprus and Israel, so I'm aware of this one. It was strict equidistance line, using actually both more or less normal baselines. But the important thing is one is from 2003 and one is from 2010. Now in our overall study area, those are the only 2 that are in fact full treaties. If we move on to the second component of our maritime boundaries, these are going to show up a little bit odd, but this is where you get the disparity between the neighbors. So if you've got Greece and Turkey, and again, I throw in the little happy face of the tri-junction point, that green line is what Greece believes is the maritime boundary for them and Turkey, and the absolute opposite red one is what Turkey thinks is their counter. So that gives a wonderful overlapping claims area. Turkey then goes on to more or less have the same, using the 2 tri-junction points for Turkey versus Egypt, and then they continue on pretty seriously pushing it to the south, the red line as it goes around Cyprus. The yellow line in the northeast is actually the unilateral from Syria, and again, the red line was Turkey. Showing the next trijunction point number 4, you're seeing the yellow line is Syria and the blue line is Lebanon's unilateral, so they don't match with our computed trijunction. The next trijunction point is the Lebanese-Israeli versus Cyprus, and you'll see the blue line is the Lebanese unilat and the pink is the Israeli. And then the last one is the Egyptian versus Israel.
Thank you, Rob, that you saw my smiley face.
I saw your happy face.
Thank you. What we have seen here is that we can do this type of straight equidistance, fair and unbiased problematic to solve, like we have seen in the previous one, where it is a clear cut between Cyprus, Israel, and Egypt. We can develop, like the previous one, a very fair and unbiased and equitable solution for all of the untreated zone, especially the one of Castelli Rizzo and the Lebanese and Israeli one. And Dr. Ronan Long yesterday, he shared in his presentation a very nice term, impose versus promote. We have to do both. We have to work for both. We have to promote, we have to dialogue. We have also to share and disseminate knowledge about this latest science and legal tools or mechanism that the UNCLO provide us with to provide a peaceful solution for at least to end up with energy peace. We will explain in the next
Keep going.
we will explain in the next slides, and Rob will show you the different maritime boundaries denomination for bilateral, unilateral, and strict equidistance line. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, so back to maritime boundaries. We've just covered the unilateral. Now we're going to start doing the computed. So the first one is Turkey-Greece, and I mentioned we started up in that corner. This is the strict equidistance line, again by the book. It has a second component, which are those small Greek islands that are 105 miles east, covering the frontier of Turkey. So we've enclaved those. You'll see that there's a strict equidistance line between Greece and Egypt also on our westernmost edge. And again, they merge and they map exactly at our trijunction point. So that next little segment is Turkey versus Greece, and again, start and ends at a trijunction. That long segment is the strict equidistance starting and ending at trijunction. Starting at the land terminus point between Turkey and Syria, you have the little green happy face and the strict equidistance that terminates at the trijunction. You then have Syria and Cyprus, strict equidistance starting and ending at the trijunction. You have the land terminus for Lebanon, Syria, going out and terminating at a trijunction. You then have Cyprus and Lebanon, strict equidistance line starting and ending at the trijunction. You then have the starting land terminus point, Israel versus Lebanon, with a strict equidistance line terminating at the trijunction. And then you have Israel and Egypt starting at a land terminus and terminating at a trijunction. And when you bring the whole package together, you bring in the two treated lines, and you basically have a nice looking solution. And you have 10 suggested strict equidistance lines, and you have 2 full bilateral treaties. And that basically gives us our summary for here. Now, just moving on, we do need to just address this because this is probably one of the more controversial ones. We just looked at this in what looks like an equitable solution, sort of by the book, but again, there's many different possibilities, but one logical possible way to address Castello for the islands is to do the same what UK did with France around the Channel Islands, where they've put a nice little enclave. All surrounding that is still French EEZ waters. There's no issues there. And if you apply that same type of a logic and you move yourself into other areas of the world, in this case enclave techniques, which is a proven equitable solution for tiny distance isolated islands or islets that are inside other countries' EEZs. You can see how we approach that with the Greek islands 105 miles inside of Turkey. So that's probably not going to be the most fondest decision, but it is actually just applying one obvious decision. As we move forward now, looking at the regional existing recent major offshore discoveries, this was sort of interesting because when we started to apply the study and then we started looking more, why are we doing all this? Well, it's all about seabed resources. And the interesting thing was, as soon as those boundaries became ratified, treated, and secure, the oil companies came in and the discoveries started to fall off the table. Tamar discovered in January 2009, then Leviathan, then Aphrodite, which actually straddles the boundary. That's why it required a treaty for unitization of the field. Zor, and then the new discovery that was just made in February of 2019. But so far, this number of these 5 discoveries is over 200 billion US dollars for the region. So 3 countries are phenomenally happy, and they probably didn't realize that law of the sea is the only reason that this is progressing now, because as soon as the treaties came in, all of a sudden the oil companies came in. Rudy.
Thank you. What you see here is this is all of the big players are coming in and it's a rush for gas. Prior to 2000, 2001, nobody was taking anybody of the East Med seriously for any seabed resources. So right now, since the rush of gas is all in, you see all of the big players competing to take blocks and ENP rights, except for Egypt, that is almost 100 years old in the oil and gas. You will see the Exxon type, the Total, the ENI, Qatar Petroleum, Novatec, and many, many others. Now, all of the countries, they have to know that we can all go back and resolve all our disputes through the Chapter 6 of the UN Charter, which calls always for pacific settlement of any dispute. This is in Article 33. And all of the East Med countries are all members and signatory of the Barcelona and the Trieste Treaty of 1995 and 1996. So they have to honor this and do it well. Thank you.
Okay, just to throw the current status in here, this is drilling info information. All the red lines are the strict equidistance lines that were computed. The blue lines are the treated lines. You can see that there's over 314,600 square kilometers geodetic of issued current day, present day blocks, and quick calculation shows 36% or more of these are contentious. These are usually or are due to the unresolved maritime boundaries. The issuing countries keep offering these blocks. No one is buying them, no one's taking them up, and the main reason why is because these are all the blocks that lie on the contentious boundaries. So it's a little bit of a forward shadowing, but basically if you have resolved boundaries, the oil companies will come, they'll explore, they'll exploit, they'll find, and the money will flow. Rudy.
Thank you. Basically, we all have to know with the latest science and technology that is available for all of us, we can definitely move forward in a peaceful and hopeful world. Given that we have discussed here yesterday and today, it is clear that when it comes to maritime boundaries, at least the international system has developed tools that virtually guarantee fair and practical outcomes for any states that commit to peaceful solutions. These tools are rooted in a comprehensive set of United Nations institutions, international laws, and the precedent set by judicial verdicts, by or multilateral agreements and arbitration settlements. What is more, they are all based on science, so once all of the facts are known, once the area in question has been precisely mapped all of the guesswork is gone, and delineating maritime boundaries becomes a relatively simple exercise. Also, like Rob says, by the book. The peoples of the Mediterranean, where we are here today, deserve the chance at affluence that new oil and gas revenues would provide. They deserve the modern schools, hospitals, roads, and other infrastructure that would reinvigorate their economies, eliminate poverty, and reduce inequality. The bottom line is that a host of opportunities are available to all of the countries and all of the nations that honor their UN Charter obligations and the EU Trieste Declaration by seeking and obtaining negotiated solutions to maritime disputes. The question is how many of their governments have the foresight to appreciate the gains within their reach, the political will to insist on peaceful means of securing their rights, and the good faith to play the rules until solutions are arrived at. I believe their peoples deserve nothing but this. Thank you.
One last thing, this slide was taken Monday. As I was flying into Nice, I looked out the window and I thought, wow, what a peaceful, tranquil sight across the Mediterranean. Hopefully law of the sea and everything that this 2 days of presentations may bring some peace to this area and maybe will be a useful final conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.